If you find yourself performing a task frequently in Microsoft Word or Excel, you can automate that task with a macro and save tons of time in the process. So today, we're going to take a look at how to create and edit macros in Microsoft Word and Excel on Roger Talks Tech. Well, hello everybody, my name is Roger and welcome to Roger Talks Tech. So today we're going to look at how to create and edit a Microsoft Excel macro. Using macros can be a real time saver and you might be amazed at how much they can speed up your workflow. Now I'm going to be creating a macro in Microsoft Excel today, but the process is nearly identical for Microsoft Word. So first off, what is a macro? Well, a macro is a series of actions such as menu commands or keystrokes that are recorded and that can be run or played back with as little as a single mouse click. As every keystroke that you make is recorded, you might want to think about what you want to accomplish ahead of time so that you don't make any errors during the recording process. You'll also need to decide where you want to store your macro. So macros can be stored in the active workbook file, meaning that they will only be available to worksheets in that workbook, or they can be stored in the global workbook file, which is called the personal macro workbook. Any macro stored in the personal file will be available to all other Excel workbooks. So, to record a macro, if you're working on a Mac, there are a couple of different ways to record a macro. First, we choose Tools, Macro, Record New Macro. Another option is to click the View tab on the ribbon and click the Record Macro icon. And the third option is from the Developer tab. So if you see here, there is no Developer tab, and that's because it's hidden by default. So if you want to display it, just choose Excel, Preferences. You click Ribbon and Toolbar here. And on the right side, under the Customize Your Ribbon area, we're going to click the checkbox next to Developer. And once I click Save button, the Developer tab is then displayed on our ribbon. So I will click Developer, and then I will choose Record Macro. Now, if you're working on Microsoft Windows, the macro icon is available on the View tab of the ribbon. You would click the arrow on the Macros button and choose Record Macro. It's also available on the Developer tab. Okay, so let's record a macro. So I'm going to start with a blank workbook here, and this is the worksheet into which I want to insert the text that I'm going to record with my macro. So to get the process started, I'll choose Tools, Macro, Record New Macro, and this displays the Record Macro dialog box. So first off, I want to provide a name for my macro, so I think I will name it My Heading. And it's important to know that macro names cannot contain spaces, but they can contain dashes or underscores. So I could change this to underscore my heading. And I want to make sure that this workbook is selected in the Store Macro In. This means that the macro will only be available to worksheets in this workbook. Now, if I wanted it to be available to all Excel workbooks, I would choose Personal Macro Workbook, but I only want it in this one. Now I want to designate a keyboard shortcut that, when pressed, will launch my macro. So we have Option, Command, plus, and then a blank box. So I want to enter, I think, Z here. So that means that whenever I press the Option, Command, and Z keyboard shortcut, my macro will launch. And I believe in Windows, this would be Alt, Command, Z. Now I want to provide a description for my macro. So I'll click in the description box here and type macro to insert a heading. And I think that'll do it. So once I click the OK button, I will begin the recording process. So I click OK. OK, I'm recording. That means any keystrokes I make now will be recorded as part of my macro. So I want to ensure that the cell A1 is active here, and I'm going to type in the name of my store, which is going to be Rodney's Video. And I'll press Return or Enter to confirm the entry. So next I'm going to type in the name of my department, and I'm going to type that in cell A2, and we'll call this Accounting Department. I'll press Return or Enter to confirm the entry. So now I want to change the font size and family of my entire workbook. So I'm going to click the Select All button here. Then I'm going to click the Home tab on the ribbon. So I think I want this to be Times New Roman and then 12. So I'll choose the Font Family drop-down list, and I'll choose Times New Roman here. And it's already set to 12, which is what I want. Good. Now I want to change the font just for my store name and my department name. So I'm going to select cells A1 and A2. And I think I want this to be 18. So let me choose 18 from the font size list. So now I want my macro to enter the current date. And I think I'll do that in cell H1. So I'll select that cell. And we'll type in equal today, open close parentheses, and then return or enter. And I think I want the date to be italicized, so I'll click the italics icon on the ribbon, and maybe I'll make that a little smaller. Let's make that a size 10. I think that'll do it. Now to stop recording, we can do that in a couple of different ways. We can choose Tools, Macro, Stop Recording. We can click the Developer tab and click Stop Recording. Click the View tab and click Stop Recording, or we can click the Stop Recording icon on the lower left corner of our worksheet, which is a little square here. So let me do that. So we'll click the icon and my macro is complete. So after we've finished recording our macro, we can run it from any one of the macros buttons on the View tab or the Developer tab using the keyboard shortcut that we designated, or if you're using a Mac, you can use the Tools, Macros menu. So to run a macro that was saved in the current workbook, you'll first need to open the workbook in which the macro was saved. If you save the macro in the personal macro workbook, the workbook is opened automatically when you launch Excel, but it is hidden from view. So let's run the macro that we just recorded. So I'm going to click the plus icon here down here to add a new sheet. I'm going to click in cell A1. So to run my macro, I'm going to click the View tab on the ribbon, click the View Macros icon, and this opens up the macro dialog. So now I need to select the macro I want to run and click Run. And there's our macro. Okay, so now let's run our macro using the keyboard shortcut that we created. So I'm going to click on the Add New Sheet icon here on the bottom of the sheet. Click in cell A1, and if you remember, that keyboard shortcut was Command-Option-Z. And voila, there's our macro. So there may be times when, after you record a macro, you may need to edit it. For example, perhaps the name of a department changed or the name of a person changed. And you can do that fairly easily from within Excel or Word. First off, it's important to know that when you record a macro, the actions that you perform are written in a programming language called Visual Basic. So to edit a macro that you recorded, it's helpful to have a little background in Visual Basic, the programming language. However, some of the commands are straightforward enough that anyone can make basic changes. So editing a macro is accomplished through the Visual Basic editor, which allows you to directly alter the programming code of the macro. So we'll select Tools, Macro, Macros to display the macro dialog box. So again, I want to select the macro that I want to edit. And this time, instead of Run, I'm going to click Edit. So this opens the Visual Basic editor. So now I'm going to change some text. So instead of Rodney's Video, I want my store name to be Rodney's Video Store. So I'll click after the word video here, tap the space bar, and type in store. So now I'm going to adjust the font size of just Rodney's Video Store and then the accounting department. And if you remember, I set the font size to those two lines to be 18 points. So I'm just going to scroll down here until I see 18. There it is, size equal 18. And I think I'll change that to 26. So let's do that, 26. And that will do it. So to close this, I will click the Close button on the top left corner of the window. And let's run our macros. So I'll click the plus icon here to add a new sheet. And we'll choose View Macros. my heading, and run. As we can see, the font size here is now 26. And the text has been changed from Rodney's Video to Rodney's Video Store. Okay, so there's one final thing I want to mention in regards to macros. If you add macros to a workbook, you need to save that workbook as either an Excel macro-enabled workbook or an Excel macro-enabled template. If you try to save it in a standard Excel format, such as a workbook or a template or a Excel 97 2004 workbook, you'll receive an error message informing you that you cannot save your workbook in this format. That's to say, standard Excel files cannot contain any Visual Basic code. So if I try to save this just as a normal workbook, let's do that. So File, Save. I'll keep the name as Book 1 and I'll Excel Workbook here and then Save. We receive the error message telling us the following features cannot be saved in macro-free workbooks, VB, Visual Basic, Project. So I'll say no. So to save it as an Excel macro-enabled workbook, I'll choose File, Save As. You could also just choose Save. I'm going to name this My Workbook. From the file format, I'm going to click the File Format drop-down list and I'll choose Excel macro-enabled workbook and then click Save. And there we go. So that's it for our discussion on Microsoft Excel macros. And as I mentioned, the process works very similarly for Microsoft Word, so you can automate your frequently performed tasks there as well. So I think that's about it. I thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate all your support. And if you like this video, I appreciate if you click the like button below, as that really helps me out. If you want to be notified whenever I release new videos, click the subscribe button and then the bell icon. So that's it for this time. Roger and out.